Back in 1940, U.S. intel started hearing some wild stories. Rumors were spreading about a Japanese fighter plane tearing through Chinese aircraft like nothing anyone had seen before. The numbers sounded ridiculous. 12 kills for every one loss, 12 to 1. Pilots were saying it moved faster, hit harder, and could outlast anything in the air. At first, nobody believed it. It just didn't sound possible. But the truth? It was even scarier. The plane was real, and it was called the Mitsubishi A6M Zero. The Zero wasn't just another warplane. It was a masterpiece of design. Built in the late 30s by Jiro Horikoshi, it was created for the Imperial Japanese Navy with one mission in mind: give Japan the edge in the Pacific. It had to launch from carriers, fly insane distances, and still dogfight like a champ. By the time it was ready, it wasn't just competitive, it was unmatched. Faster than the British Spitfire, faster than Germany's Bf-109, and with a combat radius of nearly 1,900 miles. That meant Japan could strike across the Pacific, hitting targets that the Allies thought were safe. But here's where things get crazy. To pull this off, Japan's engineers cut every bit of weight they could. The Zero's skin was so thin, barely half a millimeter in places, you could literally push a finger into it. No cockpit armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks. One burst of tracer fire and the whole thing could go up in flames. But because of that, the Zero was ridiculously agile. It could roll, climb, and turn tighter than anything else in the sky. Armed with 2 machine guns and 2 20mm cannons, it had enough firepower to shred whatever it caught in its sights. And the design was clever. Smooth, flush rivets cut down on drag. Wide elliptical wings gave it lift and grace. Even the tiniest details mattered. Pilots used hidden footholds to climb in, which folded away so the fuselage stayed sleek. It even had flotation bags inside, so if it ditched in the ocean, it wouldn't immediately sink. Everything about it screamed innovation. But here's the real kicker. The plane was only half the weapon. The other half? The pilots. Japan's training program was brutal. Only the absolute best made it through. Many trained for years before seeing combat, drilling non-stop until flying became instinct. When these elite aviators strapped into a Zero, they turned it from just a fighter into a monster of the skies. At first, the results were devastating. In China, outdated Soviet planes like the Polikarpov Throne-15 and I-16 stood no chance. And when December 7, 1941 rolled around, the Zero made history at Pearl Harbor. While Japanese bombers pounded U.S. battleships and airfields, Zeros flew cover, ripping through whatever tried to fight back. A few American pilots scrambled in their P-40 Warhawks, but they were outnumbered and completely outmaneuvered. The Zero owned the skies that morning, and it didn't stop there. Over the next months, the Zero was everywhere, escorting raids, dueling over the Pacific Islands, clashing with British hurricanes in the Indian Ocean. Dogfights turned into nightmares for Allied pilots. Stories spread fast. If a Zero locked onto you, your odds of making it back alive were slim. But here's the thing about war. You adapt, or you die. By late 42, during the brutal Guadalcanal campaign, American pilots started figuring the Zero out. Rule number 1, don't ever turn with it. That was suicide. Instead, they developed boom and zoom tactics. Dive in fast, hit hard, and climb out before the Zero could react. The old F-4F Wildcats suddenly had a fighting chance. Then came the turning point, the Akutan Zero. A Japanese pilot named Tadayoshi Koga crash-landed in Alaska. The soft ground flipped the plane, killing him, but the aircraft stayed mostly intact. The Americans recovered it, repaired it, and flew it. Suddenly, all the secrets were out. At high speeds, the controls stiffened. It rolled poorly to the right. The engine cut out in negative G dives, and it was still fragile as glass. Every weakness went straight into Allied training manuals.
At the same time, Commander Jimmy Thach came up with the famous Thach Weave. 2 Wildcats flying together, if one got tailed by a Zero, they'd crisscross paths, forcing the Zero into the line of fire of the wingman. Simple, brilliant, and deadly. It worked so well it became a standard U.S. Navy tactic. And then came the new birds. The F-6F Hellcat, designed with the Zero in mind, was tougher, faster, and deadlier. The Corsair, with its bent wings and brutal speed, entered the fight. The twin-engine P-38 Lightning dominated with its climb and firepower. The tide was turning fast. By 1944, the balance had completely flipped. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the so-called Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, American pilots destroyed Japanese planes by the hundreds. Veteran Japanese aces were gone. In their place were green recruits with barely 40 hours of flight time, going up against Americans with 500 or more. The slaughter was one-sided. Japan tried rolling out newer fighters like the Raiden and Shiden, but it was too late. Production couldn't keep up, fuel was scarce, and their best pilots were gone. By the end, the Zero wasn't a feared fighter anymore. It was a kamikaze weapon. Young pilots strapped in for one-way missions, aiming their planes at Allied ships. Most never made it through the wall of flak and gunfire. By 1945, when the massive B-29s dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the skies were clear. The Zero, once the terror of the Pacific, couldn't even get close. The story of the Zero is wild. It started as the most advanced, most feared fighter in the world. For the first year of the Pacific War, it was untouchable. But as time went on, its weaknesses showed, its aces were lost, and the legend crumbled. By the end, it wasn't a symbol of dominance, it was a symbol of desperation. From the hunter to the hunted, from the king of the skies to the last breath of a dying empire. So what do you think? Was the Zero truly the greatest fighter of its era, or just a legend that burned bright before burning out?